morning, everyone. Thank you for being here with us today. The ARC of California is thrilled to offer Caring Futures, a proven resource program dedicated to supporting caregivers and family members of adults with disabilities. Understanding the unique challenges faced by family caregivers as they age, Caring Futures offers critical planning assistance, resources, and a supportive community. Caring Conversations is just one part of Caring Futures program here at the ARC of California. We will share more about our other offerings by Caring Futures at the end of today's conversation, so please stay tuned. At the end of today's conversation, we will have a Q&A. At that time, we will invite you to raise your hand and type your question in the Q&A to ask our guest directly. If you need closed captioning today, please click it in the button bar in the bar below. Hello, everyone. In case you haven't met me before, in a previous caring conversation, my name is Felisa Strickland. I'm a sole parent caregiver for my daughter, Lily. Lily is 25 years old. She has a diagnosis of cerebral palsy, autism, epilepsy, and IDD, and she requires full-time care. We enjoy our challenging and fun life in Santa Barbara, California. Alongside full-time caregiver, I am a strong advocate for individuals with disabilities and their families. I serve as a board member for the ARC of California as well as Alpha Resource Center of Santa Barbara. I also participate on many committees and enjoy getting involved in fundraisers and advocacy projects in our community. As a parent, Caring Futures instructor, and a parent educator, I am thrilled to be here for this important conversation with you and our special guest. Today's topic is Stronger in the Difficult Places. Caring for yourself as a caregiver. We are joined by Dr. Zoe Shaw for today's conversation. Dr. Zoe Shaw is a licensed psychotherapist, speaker, podcast host, relationship coach, and a fitness fanatic. She is a mom to 5 and a wife. She is passionate about helping women who struggle in difficult relationships, especially that sometimes difficult relationship with themselves. After 15 years in traditional psychotherapy practice, Dr. Zoe jumped off the couch and now helps women using a different modality with a mix of virtual therapy, coaching services, and programs through a lens of psychology, faith, and a dash of feminism, designed specifically for women struggling in difficult relationships. Dr. Zoe is the author of the Ask Dr. Zoe column in the Grit and Grace Project Women's Magazine and the book A Year of Self-Care. She has been published in oprahmagazine.com, today.com, Recovery Today magazine, and is a frequent contributor to Your Tango. You can find her in social media on Instagram at Dr. Zoe Shaw, and in most other social places, that is also her handle. So without further ado, please welcome Dr. Zoe Shaw.
Lisa, thank you so much for having me on today.
Thank you for being here. I've been waiting for this conversation. I so enjoyed your participation in our caregiver conference back in October, and I thought I
Mhm.
would love to have Dr. Zoe Shaw come and just have a caring conversation with me. So thank you for taking the time to do that today, and with all of our viewers as well. Before we get started, many of our viewers were able to get to know you a little bit through the Caregiver Conference and then that wonderful bio that I just read. But tell me a little bit about, what got you started in this kind of work for your journey.
Yeah, for people who haven't heard my story, and I know some people have, I've had a long journey from a place of my own complex shame to being a psychotherapist with a doctorate in clinical psychology, helping other people heal theirs, which to me is such a blessing. But I grew up this black girl in this white farming community in Hagerstown, Maryland, actually a smaller place called Smithsburg, Maryland, right next to Hagerstown. And I developed what I call complex shame there. I had a lot of racial identity. I grew up in a very fundamental Christian home. My dad was a prominent doctor in the community, and I ended up getting pregnant at 15. And my parents' response to that was to send me away. They were not willing to have me there in society in that way. And so they placed me in a pregnancy home with the understanding that I would come back without a child. And I was a very compliant child at that time, and I did exactly what was asked of me. I gave birth unmedicated in a home in Virginia, left my daughter there, and went home to pretend like nothing happened. I I really pushed through a lot of my grief and my shame through accomplishments. So I was a really accomplished athlete. I got a scholarship to UCLA, ran there, got my bachelor's, got my master's, got my doctorate, and really, I think in an attempt to understand myself and what was going on with myself. In the process, I had my children, and my first born daughter, my first kept daughter, was born with a very rare genetic condition called Prader-Willi syndrome. Of course, when she was first born, we didn't know. Most of us, who are caregivers starting out when our children are babies, end up in the NICU, maybe not knowing what's happening. And in that really crazy NICU moment of time, I mean, it was weeks, which a lot of people may resonate with. I went straight back to having placed my first daughter for adoption. And I felt in that way, in a very invalid way, that I was being punished and my daughter was being punished for what I had done before. So, and I tell my story because although it's a little unique, what I have come to find is that caregivers carry a lot of shame. Caregivers are actually the strongest people that I know, and they also tend to carry the most amount of shame for not being strong enough. And as I've worked with caregivers, as I've worked with myself, and I won't go into the whole story, I actually talk about a lot about it in my book, Stronger in the Difficult Places, which is my most recent book that came out. I talk about how shame can develop, and I talk about how we have to care for ourselves in that space of shame and how we can overcome shame. And I've noticed that caregivers tend to have a specific type of shame in that way. And so that's kind of my journey of how I got here. And I've reunited with my daughter, and I have a lot of help in my family and myself as I've worked through all of my issues and overcome them. And I love, love, love. I'm so passionate about working with other women, helping them do the same.
Oh, thank you. I'm so moved by that. Actually, I got a little bit teary.
Mm.
Mostly because I can relate to what you're saying about the shame and the caregiver experience, and thank you for opening up and sharing your story and what brought you to this place. It's caregiving is complex,
It is.
and with that and the shame together, it makes sense that you would connect with that and want to actually empower other women to try to overcome that as well. So thank you for that. I love the title of your book, Stronger in the Difficult Places. So
Mm.
as a caregiver, that resonates with me so much. I've loved the book. I actually have it. I love it. It's great. I highly recommend it to everyone watching today. Um, but there are many days where I don't feel so strong, right? And so, any thoughts on that? Like, I'm sure you have, there's lots of great stuff in the book, but I mean, some tangible thoughts that people can maybe, quiet the negative self-talk and ways to access their grace instead of their, this need to want to beat ourselves up over everything that we can't do, right? So,
Right.
talk about that a little bit. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I do. First, I just want to let you guys know my daughter, Sully, she's getting ready to turn 20 this year, next month. So, we've had this journey of adolescence into adulthood, and many of you are on that journey too. I titled my podcast Stronger in the Difficult Places. I wrote my book with that title, and I know that sense can feel like, oh, I have to be stronger. You're asking me to be stronger.
Yeah.
And the reality is that it's not about being stronger, it's about accessing that strength that you already have
Mm.
and not titling yourself as weak, not feeling like I can't do it. So there's so many ways to be stronger, and one of the best ways is to borrow other people's strength when you're in a space of feeling not strong, right? And there's a couple of ways that we can borrow other people's strength. One is actually ask for help. And I know you guys have been told, oh, you need to ask and you need to ask, and that's hard. And it's way harder than people understand who tell us that. And the reality is sometimes that help isn't there, right? Sometimes that help isn't actually there. Um, Another way that I have sometimes borrowed strength is asking myself, those people who tell me, oh, you've got this, or people who compliment me. People used to say to me all the time, Zoe, you're so patient. And I remember I used to get so frustrated with that because I would think, I am not patient. I'm dealing with all these kids. I have 5 kids. And I never felt patient, but people would always say that to me. And I would always think they're wrong. And yet, in times when I felt really overwhelmed, which was often, which is why I wrote the book of self-care and this book too, I would borrow their strength and say, okay, these people think that I'm patient. They see this patience in me. I don't see it in me. I don't feel it. But how can I embody the strength that they see in me, right?
Hmm.
Giving myself just a moment. And actually, I hope that you listening are willing to take this moment here because we're really focusing on caring for yourself, focusing on being in a space of self-care, is take a moment and think about the things that people have said about you, any compliments that they've given you on your parenting, on your caregiving journey, right? And how can you kind of just soak it in for a minute and recognize that if they see that in you, it's probably there. It probably is. And how can you embody it in that moment? I mean, there's so many tips that I can give. I think tips are great. And I'll talk about a 10% better rule. But really, what's most important is that we heal our relationship with ourself and we heal our relationship with our overwhelm, right? Because when we're overwhelmed, what we're feeling is a nervous system overload, right? Our nervous system is like, I can't, I can't. And
Hmm.
mamas and dads, if you're there, I have been there a million times. And we've got to figure out what is the space that I need to put myself in. If it's 5 minutes in the bathroom, even if you can't close the bathroom door, right? If you can hide in a closet for a minute, and allow yourself to honor what you're feeling. Because when I talk about shame, there's this sense of I should be able to do this. I should be able to tolerate this. I should be able to do all these things, and I can't. And then we stop there. And when we stop there, all we're doing is we're igniting our fight or flight system that's saying, I'm in danger, right? But if
Yeah.
instead we don't stop, instead we say, wait, I am feeling like I can't do this for one more second. And that's okay. I am feeling like this isn't fair. I am feeling ashamed of myself. I am feeling ashamed of my child. And we don't want to admit that sometimes. And that's why I love to admit it because I want to give people a space to have a language for the things that they feel and they don't feel like they're allowed to feel it, right? And when we don't allow ourselves to feel it, then we power on and we push ourselves and we make it worse. And so the best thing that we can do in those spaces of overwhelm is to say the things that maybe we don't feel so great about. Maybe we feel even some shame about.
Yeah, and sort of like you've got to move through it to get through it, right? Like so you've got to allow yourself to feel it so you can move through it. And you don't have to define it and figure it all out in that moment. You just have to let yourself feel it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. And it's very sometimes that you get that paralyzed feeling because you're so in the overwhelm that you
Mhm.
can't allow yourself to just sort of sit with it for a second and acknowledge it and then you know it's sort of like when I go in my room and have a really good cry.
Yeah.
And like I just know that it's the only thing that's going to let me move through this. And I've gotten to the place where I don't judge that anymore. I just let myself have it because 9 times out of 10, I come out of that space feeling more in charge and in control of what's going to happen next and not so scared and frightened and shameful about what I just experienced, right? So thank you. That's a great, those are some great things to give people a chance to sit with and sort of, ponder over. What would you say to those caregivers that feel so overwhelmed and swallowed up by their care of others that they almost feel paralyzed and can't see or wink a way forward?
Yeah. There's this rule that I have created for myself, and that is stop before you agree. And I'm really falling in love with this rule, and I'm working with a lot of clients through this rule. And it applies to so many things. You can just like, okay, simply, okay, stop before I agree to do something, right? But what I have found is yes, it applies to stop first before you agree to do something. And the reason why is because you need to figure out how can I choose myself too? Not only because as caregivers, we've got other people we have to choose, but how can I choose myself as well? And before we rush to agree to do anything, we need to be asking ourselves that question because in that pause, sometimes we can not self-abandon, which caregivers tend to do is self-abandon, right? So there's the actual behavior of stopping before you agree to do something. And then there's the behavior of stopping before you agree to all the words and the phantom critic voices that you tell yourself. Because when we are in that space of overwhelm, we have a story. We have a story about what's happening, and we have a story about probably us feeling like a victim, feeling put upon, it's unfair. We have all of these stories. And I'm not saying that they're not 100% true, but if we can stop before we agree with that story, a little practice, and this takes time, so I know caregivers don't have a lot of time, and maybe you can figure out how to even just do this in your head a little bit, is think about what's the story I'm telling myself about this moment? How could I tell this from five different viewpoints? From someone looking at me, right? From maybe my child's viewpoint, maybe my spouse's viewpoint. How could I tell the same story from other people's viewpoints? And sometimes that can help bring you back to a place of center. And am I telling myself these stories regularly? And is that contributing to how I'm feeling, right? And how can I either tell myself or create a different story? And if this story is something where I am absolutely the victim, then I go to that 10% rule, which is how could I possibly make this just 10% better? What would that look like if I could make this just 10% better? And so when it comes to overwhelm, we have to realize that overwhelm is both a story we tell ourselves, it's our nervous system, right? Reaction, and then it's our choice to how we respond to it. And it comes back to slowing yourself down. And so if you stop before you agree, you're slowing yourself down in the moment and going, wait, wait, wait. Do I really have to do all this? Could I skip a bath today? Could I, you know, do something a little bit different if today feels like it's just too much because we create these rules for ourselves that we have to do this? And maybe we don't. Maybe we don't have to do all of it. Maybe today we only have to do 90% of it.
Yeah, and if in thinking that way, you've made space for that 10%, right? Yeah,
Mhm.
I do you have some other examples of the 10%? Because I was gonna add that was gonna be my next question for you, and then you touched on it. And I'm thinking, oh, I want to hear more about this 10%. Like what are some examples of that could work in the caregiving scenario where you could actually improve a situation by 10%?
That's such a great question. So one of the ways that, like one of the things that I just said is, okay, let's look at your bedtime routine with your kid, right? And some of us have very, exhaustive bedtime routines. Look at your morning routine. What is something that is great that you do for your child, but doesn't have to be done that day? And so, it could be that maybe you skip reading a book. It could be that maybe you do skip the bath that night. It could be that you ask somebody else to come in and do something for you. Another good thing to do is if you could prep for the days when you can't, that
Mm-hmm.
could be helpful too. And maybe have like a corner in a closet or something where something's pre-prep that maybe you generally prep every single day for your child. Um, the 10% rule could also apply to things that you do to yourself. So there could be, what can I take away? Like, can I take 10% of this duty that I have to do today? Or could I add 10% more to something that I need,
For
right?
you,
For
yes, just for
you.
you. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Could I give myself 10% longer to sleep in or just take a nap that day when I don't usually? Could I, um, I'm trying to think of things that I would do generally to, for me, it might be, can I stay in my hot bathtub for
Yeah.
10% longer than I usually do? But it's both, what can I take away that would just be a little bit that I take away from this day?
Yeah, to
And
kind of simmer down the overwhelm. And then
right,
what can you add?
add.
Just give yourself some comfort and some attention because you need that attention too that you're putting usually in another place. Um, as we're talking about this, what's coming up for me is, you talked about shame in the beginning, and I'm feeling caregivers
Mm.
sort of feeling like, is there a certain element of shame that's going to rise up when I start to do this extra 10% stuff for me? And I'm thinking, how do we overcome that part, right? Like we have to give ourselves permission somehow to give ourselves permission to actually make that choice, that decision that we're going to do something to make things 10% better today without feeling guilty about it, right?
Yeah, well, let's talk about that
Yeah.
because first, I think we need to really understand what's the difference between shame and guilt,
Yeah.
right? And we
Yeah.
do feel a lot of shame as caregivers, and
Yeah.
shame is always a lie. Just letting you know, shame is always a lie. So, guilt is a feeling that can be extremely healthy when it's valid. Guilt is a feeling and emotion that tells us I've done something wrong. I've broken a moral code. A moral code. Not giving your child a bath is not a moral code. Unless you've made it, and that might be a lens that you need to change.
Yeah.
But guilt says I've broken my moral code. And it's great because guilt will incite change. If we've done something to break our moral code, then what we will do, our psyche says, okay, well, I need to go back and repair that. And then if I can't repair it, then I need to change and not do that in the future, right? So that's why guilt is great. It's a motivator for healthy change. Shame is unhealthy in all of its forms. Shame is a physiological state that we feel. It's a message and emotion that says, I am wrong, right? And if you are wrong, then there's nothing for you to do except for hide. So shame makes us hide. It makes us hide from ourselves. It makes us hide from other people. We don't want people to know. We don't want to tell them because we feel this sense of shame. And so we have to begin to identify when we feel shame and name it and do the opposite of what it wants us to do. And so let's say you decide, I'm not giving, oh, I'll tell you something I did for an entire year in my home. And this was when all my kids were young and I was homeschooling and working. And I remember I felt so overwhelmed by the dishes. And one day I just said, I'm not going to do this anymore. I bought paper plates and I bought plastic utensils, which I know is not great for the environment, but it was really great for the environment in my home. And for
Mhm.
almost a year, we ate on all my nice dishes stayed in the cabinet, and that got me through that year. And for some reason, after some time, it just I had more capacity. I was able to get through, and we just stopped doing that. But that was a gift that I gave to myself that I felt a little bit of guilt for, right?
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Um, and sometimes we have to do things like that because they're more caring for ourselves than the guilt that we feel. So you said, how can we do it without feeling guilty? Don't try. Do it and allow the guilt to come and you deal with the guilt, right? You recognize, what is this? Is this shame or is this guilt? When we feel like we want to hide something, we don't want people to know, that's shame. And shame is unhealthy in all of its places. And so
Yeah.
your work is to let shame kind of roll down the river and not hide and allow yourself to accept what you're doing in the moment and understanding that all behavior makes sense in a context. So there's a very good reason why you need to do that. And you may not always need to do it, but for now you do. I think when we try to wait until an emotion feels good to do something, then we're sabotaging ourselves instead of saying, let me do it anyway. I know that guilt will come, and I know what I'm going to do with that guilt. I'm not going to be the sponge for it.
Yeah, it seems like it's sort of about letting go of some of that control of having to control the outcome of everything that
Mm.
like you should just sort of organically let it happen the way that it's going to happen once you make that decision, right? And then,
Mhm.
like you said, deal with each consequence of that, however feels appropriate at that time. But
Yeah.
judging it's not going to be helpful, right? And so that's what I find is hard for me sometimes. And I love your paper plate story because I actually did the exact same thing.
Did you? Good for
Yes.
you.
And
Yes.
unfortunately, we're still sticking with it because it
Good for
works for
you.
my life.
Hmm.
You just have to figure out what are the things that actually take something off of my plate that give me some space to focus on other things that feel more pressing. But yeah, no, I was like, yay, another paper plate. So
Yes.
thank you
And
for sharing that. That's a wonderful example of something small you can do. And I did feel like uncomfortable at first because I thought, gosh, if people only knew that I was using paper plates every day for every meal, they'd be like, wow, that's so not good. And then I thought, and I don't care because it's what I need. I
exactly.
also do things like Instacart. People are like, you use Instacart still? I'm like, yeah,
Mhm.
the
Yes.
pandemic actually showed me that this was really helpful for my life. And so I
Absolutely.
don't do it for every shop, but I do it when it feels easier for me, and I'm okay with that. So the little things you can do just to take some things off your plate, or the things that you can add to your schedule that actually nurture you, that's so meaningful, right?
It
Thank
is.
you. Thank you, Dr. Zoe, for sharing that with us. Before we go to questions, do you have any last things you'd like to share, comments or thoughts that you'd like to share with everyone?
I do want to just kind of remind anybody who might be listening and feeling like, I think I might have some kind of shame. And if there's anywhere that you feel like you need to hide in your life, that is where shame lives. And one of the first steps I encourage you to do is talk about it, is to the opposite of what shame wants you to do. And whether it's a friend or a clergy or a therapist, find somebody that you can talk about your shame too, because that is one of the steps. It's not the only, especially when there's complex shame, but that is one of the steps that can really help to release you, because often we go around carrying a lot of things and we're carrying enough in our caregiving journey, and those kinds of emotional burdens we shouldn't be holding on to.
Thank you for that. Thank you for saying that. As you were saying it, I thought to myself, that is one of the hardest things is going through the things we already have to go through. Carrying that extra weight is just
Yeah.
something we really need to release for ourselves, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, what a wonderful conversation with you. Thank you so much. So
You're
before we
welcome.
go on to questions, I just want to share a little bit more about what Caring Futures has to offer. We have some classes. The Future is Now. Designing a support plan for you and your adult family member is a 6-week live online class series where caregivers develop a comprehensive future planning guide for the caregiver and their adult family member with a disability, all in a small and welcoming environment. We are excited to announce that we also have launched a new self-paced online class as well. Self-Care Matters, Wellbeing for the Caregiver is a 2-week live online class series where caregivers learn about and practice tips, resources, strategies to improve or sustain their well-being. Future is Now and Self-Care Matters classes are also offered in Spanish, and you can visit our Caring Futures website at caringfutures.org and join our mailing list to keep up to date with these offerings and to register for classes and more. Also, if you want to continue this conversation, then I invite you to join our Caring Futures Facebook group. It's a private group only for family caregivers and is a safe space for us to share our triumphs and challenges. A link to the Facebook group is being posted in the chat right now. So we're ready to begin the Q&A. Let's go ahead and go over to our Q&A section and see if we have some questions. It looks like we have a couple. And let's see. So Marcy's asking, I feel all of this as a caregiver,
Mm.
overwhelmed deeply right now. So between taking care of my special needs son, my mother, oh, we've a sandwich group here, yeah,
Yeah.
took a fall and broke her jaw. Monday, she is having her jaw wired shut for 2 to 4 weeks. I am being called upon to help her through this and help her with her liquid diet, etc. Plus, she's my mother and my best friend. How do I say no? I stay at home with my son while others in the family work, so it all kind of falls on me. All I want to do is help, but it sure is a lot.
Oh my goodness, Marcy. I feel for you. I feel for you in that. And you know, this happens in families where there becomes one person who's kind of designated as she'll do it.
Yeah.
And the reason why is because you'll do it. And it's really hard to put in those boundaries. And I know that I'm hearing the voices in your family and yourself that says, well, I don't work outside of the home, and so I should, right? Well, Marcy, you work. You work just like they work. And that narrative is not okay. And so my question is, just like they're asking you to work outside of your work hours to help your mom, and of course you want to, that's your mom, you're going to do that. But you also need to ask them in the hours that they're not working to pitch in, because if you're going to be doing it, then you need some space and rest. And so it's hard. It is so hard, especially when we're caregivers. We get into this habit of just caring and moving forward and not thinking about ourselves. And it feels like thinking about ourselves is selfish. We know that's not true. Logically, we know that's not true. And that doesn't matter because we have to know it and feel it here. And we have to speak up even when we feel the guilt, especially when we've been kind of pigeonholed in our family culture as the one who does it. And I'm going to say something too. Sometimes there's some pride in that. And I'm the one that takes care of everybody. And sometimes there's identity in I'm the one that takes care of everybody. And so if we ask for someone else to do something, we can feel like we're going against and kind of losing our own sense of identity.
Mm.
And that's not your fault. And I'm not saying that in any way for you to feel bad, but your identity has to be more than just as a caregiver. And I hate to even say that word just. Caregiving is important and it's valuable and it's honorable and it's good and it's necessary. And you are more. And so if you have family members, which you said you do, which is great, then you need to call upon them when their work is done for the day to come help you with your mom and ask them for specific hours when you can kind of get away and rest because you're going to be doing a lot of it already during your work day.
Thank you, Dr. Zoe. And yeah, I was thinking about that too, Marcy. Would you like to come on and speak, Marcy? If you want to raise your hand or
Hi, Marcy.
how would we do that?
I see her face popped up, but she's muted.
Oh, okay. So maybe unmute. Marcy, there you
Hello.
are.
Hello.
Hi. Hi.
And Felisa, this is actually Robin.
Oh, okay. Hi,
I don't
Robin.
know if you can see my picture, but
I can see your picture. I said, that's not Marcy, that's Robin.
yeah, yeah. So I don't know if you guys see me?
I just see your
Just
picture.
see
We
your
don't see your
profile
Okay.
video.
picture.
Okay, perfect. So I'm still in my jammies.
Good for you.
Um, yeah, so it is a lot, and I like what you said, Dr. Zoe, about the pride issue because that is something that's very real with me. Like it
Yeah.
feels good to take care of, your mom, or even right now, my mother-in-law just got out of the hospital. She's having some issues. So she called me the other day and just asked me, when your husband goes to spring training next weekend, maybe you'd like to come over and help me with some spring cleaning. I'm like, what? Spring cleaning, and I would love to help her with the task or something, but I have a lot of stuff here to do, so I can't go and clean her house. And but for me, it's hard. It's hard for me to say no because it's your
Right.
family. And you do take pride in people knowing, oh, she always takes care of everybody, that type of thing. But yeah, it's a struggle and it is
I was gonna
related.
I was going to say, after listening to Zoe's wonderful answer, but also I love that you touched on, Dr. Zoe, the fact that Robin works too, or Marcy,
Yes,
whichever one
yes,
you are
yeah,
today.
yeah,
But your job is round the clock. So there's something to be said for that. And I know that because yeah, while you might have some respite breaks and your husband might step in here and there, just because your work is at the home doesn't mean that you need some scheduled time away from that work too, so that you can help your mom. So other people need to I would think a good idea would be to, as a family, kind of sit down and say, how can we make this work for everybody,
right.
so that all of it doesn't fall on you. And that'd be kind of a step, right? Like a step towards letting go of some of that. I have to do it all.
Absolutely.
Thank you so
Robin,
much for the question.
Sure.
yeah, you might want to implement that rule for yourself of stop before you agree.
Mm-hmm.
Because it just gives you that space. If someone asks you a question, you can say, let me get back to you. And you take that space to stop and ask yourself, what is my motivation? Is this
Hmm.
obligation? Is this guilt? Is this a true desire? Right? Do I have the time? You create your own rubric for answering a question like that so that you're still caring for yourself. Because, yes, it does feel good to take care of everybody. It feels good for everybody to kind of turn to you as that person, but we cannot self-abandon in that
Mm-hmm.
pursuit. And so maybe try that rubric.
Right. No, thank you for that. And I'm trying to put it into words, but when you say shame,
Mm,
it's kind of like, I had big plans before my son was born 20 years ago. I
yeah,
was in school, I was doing this, I was doing that. I had, I wanted a career, things like that. So
yeah.
I think that's where my shame lies with,
Mhm.
is that I'm, quote unquote, just a caregiver, where I know that's not true.
Right.
So when all these things come up, oh, you can help this person, you can help that person. It's like, okay, I can do it because I want that pride in myself. Um, but then it exasperates the whole issue. And then I'm overwhelmed. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's something I have to work on saying no.
It's time to take care of yourself in
Hmm.
addition to the other people you're taking care of, and maybe start exploring what else? What else for me?
Hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for your
Welcome.
time and your answers. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Robin.
Uh-huh.
We also have Carrie asking, do you recommend the same idea of releasing shame and using the 10% idea for relationships with our spouses as well? We all know that so often relationships are also strained while raising kids, adults with different abilities. Carrie, would you want to come on camera or on audio? Do you want to elaborate on that? Yeah, she's raised her hand. Let's see. There she is.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, we can.
Awesome. Well,
Hey,
I just want to
baby.
thank you guys. I am just so happy sitting over here, just loving this conversation so much. So my thought behind this question was, some of the same shame and guilt as being a caregiver
Yep.
that is experienced is sometimes also experienced with our spouses or our partners. And I'm wondering again, it's such a, we're not just caregivers. Robin just touched all of my on, I was going to have a big career. I wanted to go to school. Thankfully, I am now. I'm very proud of myself. But there's that underlying guilt of I'm taking time away from my daughter and from my husband. So
Mm-hmm.
as I work on my feelings and emotions about myself as a caregiver, I also want to make sure that I'm considering him. and how to keep our relationship strong in the midst of this.
Right. Okay. So I'm trying to understand your question. The first answer is absolutely it applies in all of your relationships, even your relationship with with your work, your family, your spouse. So yes, it absolutely applies. I'm trying to understand a little bit though about the question because are you feeling like are you feeling guilty because you feel like you're not giving enough to your husband? Are you just worried about trying to.
Yeah, yeah, probably about all of that. And I think maybe some of um the thought processes I have going is I'm not spending enough time with him, but if I make those boundaries of I need to give myself a date night every week with him, how is it okay to do that? Which of course it is, right? But I think I just kind of struggle with that. Does that make sense?
Well, we're going to get to it making
Okay.
sense. The first question is, do you feel like this is an internal struggle that you have, or do you feel that these are messages you're getting from him?
Oh, that's a good question. Um, I think it's more an internal struggle in me
Mm-hmm.
because I'm constantly thinking of everyone and I want everyone to be feeling okay
Okay.
and like they're all getting a piece of my attention.
Right. And so you've recently gone back to school, is that what I heard?
I have, yes.
Okay. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations. How recent is this?
I'm finishing my second quarter in grad school right
Oh,
now.
oh, wow. Okay. So that's huge. And you've started this journey. Well, it sounds like you're almost halfway through. Um, okay. So you have this sense of, I feel guilty. I'm spending all this time getting this education when
Hmm.
I've been caregiving. So it makes sense. That's what I would call invalid guilt.
Hmm.
Because as a caregiver, we often feel like any time we spend on ourselves is selfish, right? Even though
Yes.
there's a good reason for me doing that. I matter too. Me pursuing this career and this education matters. You know that. But emotionally, you still feel very, and I'm going to use the word codependent.
Hmm.
And the reason why is because as caregivers, it's very easy to slip into this codependent place where we do feel like we are responsible for everyone's emotions, everyone's feelings, making everybody okay, sometimes at the detriment of ourselves. And
Hmm.
so maybe this is an internal thing for you. And if it is, then yes, that's work that you need to work on is learning to tell yourself a different story, right? Is paying attention to where do those messages come from.
Hmm.
If it's coming also from your husband, um, and really either way, I think the best thing that you need to do is have a conversation with him and ask
Hmm.
him, how are you feeling about, I'm now in my second semester. Yes, this is taking time. Thank you for your support.
Hmm.
Let's talk about how this looks like with our relationship. Are you feeling like you're not getting enough attention? Can we talk about that? I would have a conversation with him. And if he's feeling that pull, then yes, a date night. I would suggest a date night, whether it's once a month or on some regular basis in any relationship, no matter what, because you need to be able to focus some time on the relationship. But figuring out what could we do to make him feel a little better and still support you and what you're doing, if that makes sense.
Hmm. It does. It does. Thank you. Yeah, I know my questions are usually all over the place. I have a bunch in my head at once. Felisa knows.
No, it
Well,
wasn't all over the place.
no, and you guys, you got to the answer very eloquently. So yeah, a very thoughtful process. I love that it, usually does require us asking some more questions about
Mhm.
what it is that's troubling us or that we're having a hard time understanding to get us to the place where we can actually give ourselves the answers. Thank you so much. Thanks for the
Thank
question,
you.
Carrie.
Thank you.
And congratulations for being in school. That's fantastic.
Thank you so much.
Well, we have one more comment in our and that is we have another paper plate mom or fan.
Yay!
Not that we have someone anonymously saying, thank you for validating the use of paper plates. I
Yeah.
particularly appreciate how the word environment was used to describe the household setting. So
Yeah.
true. And then, of course, loved your 10% examples. So, what a great conversation. And thank you for being so thoughtful about all of the examples that you gave and how they connect to our caregivers and the important work that they do every day that oftentimes they're not giving themselves enough credit for. So I really enjoyed meeting with you today, Dr. Zoe. Thanks so much
Yeah.
for being with us. Thank
Thank you
you,
for having
everyone,
me.
for attending, and we hope that you have a wonderful day, and we'll see you next time.